Welcome to the Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to the Plant Report because every plant has a story. Our plant today is Tulsi, and our guest is Alena Steen. Alena has spent the last decade as an organic farmer and native plant gardener. Alena and her partner Danny are the owners of Night Heron Farm, an herbal medicine company and CSA. They grow and tend their plants on the Night Heron Farm located in Santa Barbara, California. Alena and Danny also grow organic cut flowers for market and have a flower CSA. Alena believes that growing and producing local medicine is a way to contribute to a more just and sustainable world, where healthcare is centered within ourselves. You can learn more about Alena and Danny and their wonderful plants and herbal remedies at nightheronfarm.org. Welcome to the Plant Report, Alena. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You and I share a love for Tulsi, which is the plant we'll be talking about today. And just so everyone's on the same page, and I could be really botching this pronunciation, the Latin name for Tulsi is Ocimum tenuiflorum. And hopefully, please forgive me, Latin name gods, if that was wrong.
I know.
And so Tulsi is also known as holy or sacred basil. And I believe that Tulsi is native to India, and in Sanskrit, Tulsi means incomparable one. And that's really a hint to us as to how revered this plant is in Indian culture and Asian cultures. And I just wanted to know, Alena, when did you first encounter Tulsi?
Yeah, I first met Tulsi when I was an intern on a medicinal herb farm in Southern Oregon. And it was in the fall, so because it was getting colder and the kind of Tulsi that farm was growing is a temperate kind that is sensitive to the cold, it was not in its full glory. So I didn't really see the full life cycle of Tulsi until the following year when my partner and I set off on our own and grew about a half acre of medicinal herbs, and Tulsi was one of the main plants in our garden. So I would say I best began to learn and understand more about Tulsi when I was growing the plant myself, which was only 6 years ago.
Wow. And can you share with our listeners just a bit? I know Night Heron Farm, I've seen photos. It looks absolutely stunning. Can you just share just a teeny bit about your farm and what else you have growing there?
Sure. Yeah. So my partner and I grow a really diverse mix of plants on a little under an acre. We're just a few minutes inland from the coast, so our farm is still really influenced by the marine layer, but does get warmer in the summer, which Tulsi loves. And we grow a lot of medicinal herbs. Tulsi is definitely one of the most important ones. Ashwagandha is another, lemon balm, anise hyssop, spilanthes, yarrow, echinacea, lots of other plants too. And then we also grow cut flowers for market. And then we grow our food as well. So everything is kind of scattered together, which for us, the wilder, the better.
I love that approach too, where everything's kind of mixed in. You can find out what plants like to grow near each other that way too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Tulsi, we know it's native to India. And can you give us a bit of an idea of where does it like to grow? Is it fairly easy to grow?
Tulsi is incredibly easy to grow. It's definitely one of the plants that I recommend for even the most beginning gardener because it's just a very adaptable plant, which is lovely because that's part of the qualities in our own bodies. If we take Tulsi internally, it's a plant that helps to make us more adaptable. But it is, so there's a few different kinds of Tulsi. So it's a little confusing because the common name of Tulsi applies to a few different species of plant that are the same genus but different species. The kind that we grow the most of in our garden is called Temperate Tulsi, and it's an annual, so it dies back in the winter once it gets colder. But there are also perennial kinds of Tulsi, Rama and Vana Tulsi, that are year-round perennials in warmer, more tropical climates like India, where they're originally from, which is a subtropical climate. But the temperate Tulsi is what we grow the most of in our garden. And so its life cycle is from seed in late winter, early spring through into early winter when the first frost comes. And yeah.
And do you know if the different type varieties of Tulsi have different medicinal qualities?
They do in Ayurvedic medicine, which is the tradition, the traditional medicine from where Tulsi is from. So all the different Tulsis have different properties and are even extracted in different forms to enhance certain properties. I really can't speak a lot to that because Ayurvedic medicine is way above my level of understanding of medicinal herbs, but I know that there are different traditional preparations for the different kinds of Tulsi and that they all have different qualities. And so in Ayurvedic medicine, ideally, all three forms of the most commonly grown Tulsi would be in a formula that centers around Tulsi, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And so let's walk through if we have some Tulsi seeds, and I know there's different ways to propagate Tulsi, which we'll talk about, but you have some seeds, and I really want to stress to people that Tulsi does offer us a lesson in patience, right? Because it can take a long time for those seeds to show signs of life.
Yeah. So we have a greenhouse. So we'll start our Tulsi seeds in the greenhouse probably in late February, early March. And you can do the same thing in your house, just so long as it's warmer than the outdoor temperatures. If you want to start seeds into cell flats or 6-packs or whatever you're using. And yeah, Tulsi has a really sporadic timeline of germination. So in our greenhouse, the first Tulsi will probably sprout within a week, but then the flat will look very polka dotted, like the germination looks really uneven, but that's because other seeds are germinating on a longer time frame. So we'll keep the same flat for a month, and by the end of that month, there will be Tulsis of completely different sizes in the same flat. So I think of that like, unlike vegetable seeds, a lot of them have been bred over time to germinate really quickly and uniformly. And Tulsi is just a wilder seed, and so it takes a little longer. But it is very easy to start from seed. It doesn't require any sort of special treatment other than warmth. And it's also very easy to direct seed in your garden once the weather warms. If, again, you remember that just because they haven't sprouted within a week doesn't mean they're not going to in the next week. So the general rule of thumb for seeding that I follow is plant as deeply as the seed is big. So Tulsi seed is quite small, like other basil seeds, of which they're the same genus. Actually, yeah, they are the same genus. So you plant very shallowly, but do cover with soil. But other than that, no special requirements. And it's just such an amazing and simple plant to start.
I'm so glad you said that about the sporadic, kind of the different seeds sprouting at different times, because I have had flats where I thought, okay, all the vegetables, everything's sprouted. I got 3 Tulsis, and then if I just, before I compost the soil or reuse it, if I let it sit there a little longer, I see new little Tulsis popping up. So it's really cute.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the procrastinators. I love you. Okay. Uh, And what about cuttings? Can you, if you have a good friend or a neighbor that has a great Tulsi plant, can you grow it from cuttings?
Yeah, you totally can. It's in the basil genus, which is in the mint family, and so a lot of those plants do fine from vegetative propagation. So yeah, if you take a cutting of a stem and just leave it in water somewhere in filtered sunlight for a week or so, it should root and then you could plant it. I usually just do seed because we have a lot of seed that we collect every fall, but you can vegetatively propagate as well.
And is it easy? I think Tulsi would be a really easy plant to enter the world of seed saving.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is really good at making seed, and we also always have volunteer Tulsi in our gardens if we allow Tulsi to go to seed. So even though it's an annual plant, it will almost act like a perennial because it's so good at self-seeding. So yeah, if you do want to do that, you would just allow the plant to go to seed, which means allowing the flowers to ripen. And the seed is, when it's ripe, it's very small and this very beautiful glossy black color. And it will fall right out of the flower heads when it's ripe. So as you watch the seed heads begin to turn brown, you can kind of just check on the ripeness of the seed by just tapping the brown seed heads over your open hand. And when the seed is ripe, it will just fall out.
That sounds so easy.
Yeah, it's really straightforward.
And so say your little Tulsis, they're really cute, they're growing. How big are they usually when you transplant them out into the garden if you didn't direct seed?
Yeah, we probably let them get to, gosh, maybe like 4 inches, and then we'll plant out. So we let them get a little bigger. They do love being in the greenhouse, especially in the early spring, since the temperature can still be quite chilly where we live. So we let them stay in the greenhouse until the daytime temperatures are pretty consistently warm, since Tulsi definitely does better as the summer warms.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And so now you have your Tulsi plant. It's growing in your garden. What are some of your tips for growing, how to have happy Tulsi?
Yeah, well, like I said, Tulsi is really adaptable. So we've grown it in all kinds of soil types. We've grown it in coastal Northern California where the summer is foggy and 50 degrees. And I thought for sure Tulsi would not do well, and it did great. So it's a really hardy plant. A lot of medicinal plants, we have learned over time that the soil, we don't have to make the soil as rich as we do for some of our vegetable and cut flower crops, because a lot of medicinal plants are really tough. They do well in even low water situations or low soil fertility situations. And since Tulsi is a medicinal plant and we're after the strongest medicine possible, creating an environment that's a little bit stressful or a little bit challenging actually triggers a lot of the chemical responses in the plant that are also what are medicinal in our bodies. So having a slightly droughty garden or planting Tulsi in slightly more bare soil actually triggers plant responses that strengthen the medicinal qualities for us. So we really don't do a lot of extra work for the Tulsi. We will add just a very thin layer of compost to the soil when we're planting. But other than that, no supplemental compost tea, and kind of low water, even in the height of summer when it's getting quite hot in our inland garden. We'll probably still be watering just once a week.
Wow. So it's very low maintenance.
Yeah, it's just the number one plant to grow as a beginner. It really does fine in all different kinds of situations.
And what we haven't even talked about yet is that wonderful aromatic. When you brush against the Tulsi or harvest the Tulsi, it's just the most wonderful scent.
Yeah, it's so fragrant. The flowers are really lovely purple flowers, and pollinators adore Tulsi. They're always covered in honeybees and native bees and butterflies. They're just a really awesome plant to grow in your garden for pollinators and for biodiversity too.
I'm really beginning to think that what's good for the pollinators is good for us
Oh,
because
yeah.
the plants, yeah, it's like the plants that they love are usually so medicinal and wonderful. And I notice with my comfrey that often it's the big, fat, the kind of chubby bumblebees They love that the
Yeah.
flowers. It's so cute.
Yeah, I always see them in our country too, or
Hmm.
like falling asleep in the leaves.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so cute.
Oh. And so, when do you like to harvest your Tulsi? Like, how do you know when is the optimal time to harvest the leaves?
Sure. So Tulsi grows really, really quickly. And so, probably our first harvest, if the weather is consistently warm, is probably within a month and a half to 2 months of planting out the plant starts, not growing from seed, but when the plants are big enough to transplant out of doors.
Hmm.
And you can harvest similarly to culinary basil, so you can pinch the tips and just make tea as you go, or tincture or vinegar. What we do is we let the plants get a little taller, probably to about a foot tall, and then we will harvest the whole plant, leaving about a quarter to a third of the plant behind, but cutting off the entire top of the plant. So you can harvest either way. You can pinch the growing tips as they arrive, or you can let the whole plant get bigger and then cut down pretty sharply. Tulsi loves being pruned, so everywhere you cut will form a branching new stem and even more growth. And we harvest in the middle of the day at the hottest time of day, because the essential oils really come to the surface of the leaves as the day warms. The plants smell much more fragrant, and that gives us a clue that the medicinal qualities of the leaf are most viable in that kind of high noon time.
Mm-hmm. And do you harvest when the plant is flowering, or does it not matter so much with that timetable?
You can do either. We usually wait until the plants are flowering, so
Mm-hmm.
that the teas that we make and the herbal medicine that we make are leaf and flower.
Mm, interesting. And so, really, Tulsi's kind of a cut and come again plant.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, from the plants that we grow, we are probably harvesting 5 to maybe even 6 times in a growing season.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, or you could do like every day pinching the tips. The kind of harvesting that I'm talking about is where we come and we'll cut the whole plant back really sharply.
And so, say you have a bunch of Tulsi leaves and blossoms. Is it hard to dry Tulsi? Because I know the leaves are have a lot of moisture and essential oils in them.
Yeah, that's a great question. They're definitely they just take longer than a lot of other herbs because of that really high oil content. And Tulsi also likes to be dried at a warmer temperature. Um, so we dry our herbs in our greenhouse that gets covered with light blocking shade cloths in the summer. So it still gets really warm inside, but it stays really dark, which is ideal for medicinal herb drying. It's still totally doable, and it's also something that you can do in your home with leaves just laid out flat on a window screen or a sheet or hanging in bundles, whatever your preferred method is. You just need to make sure that it stays pretty warm. And again, we just use our hands to tell us when Tulsi is dry and ready to be more permanently stored. And you should be able to crumble the leaves in your hand. You know then that it's dry enough to store without molding. I have noticed, so Tulsi definitely takes longer, I would say 7 to 10 days, as opposed to a lot of medicinal herbs. If you have a consistently warm drying situation, they can be ready to package within maybe 5 days. Tulsi definitely takes longer, just like the germinating. Um, and I do notice that the stems can still seem almost the stems can still seem like they have a little water in them, even when the leaves are completely dry. So if that's the case, I would let the stems fully dry out before I broke herbs down to store them.
Okay, so you're also harvesting stems as well. So you're just cutting off kind of larger pieces.
Well, we are not going
Hmm.
after the stem. We have a sifter that tries to get most of the stem out of our finished product, because the stem doesn't have the high potency medicine that the flowers and leaves do. but some always gets in. And so that's why I'm really careful to make sure that the stems are also fully dry so that they don't get the leaf wet again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then, so you have your dried herbs, and I'd love to chat with you just a bit about some of your favorite recipes and ways that you process or use Tulsi, the processed Tulsi. But first, if you could share with listeners some of the medicinal properties of Tulsi.
Sure. It's almost an overwhelming list. Tulsi is just such an amazing all-purpose medicinal herb, which is another reason beyond it just being very easy to grow that people who are really interested in starting a medicinal herb garden, that's always my first pick for people because it really can do so much. So you can use Tulsi topically on your skin because it's very antibacterial and antiviral. So it's actually a really great ingredient in any kind of herbal oil or salve that you would make to use for cuts or scrapes or just for your skin for a face cream. It is really at home in any sort of skin recipe. And taken internally, it also does so much. So like I said, it's antiviral and antibacterial. So it's a really great ingredient in any sort of immune support formula that you're crafting. Probably what it's most known as is as an adaptogen, which is a kind of medicinal plant that helps to shift how your body responds to stress. So it's a plant that works with your hormones and your adrenal system and your nervous response to alter how your body responds to stress. So that's kind of this tonic use of Tulsi. If you take Tulsi every day over time, that's called tonic use. And the more tonically you take Tulsi, the more your body will be able to shift its stress response. But also taken in the moment, it's just a very heart and mind soothing plant. So it's something that we use every day, mostly in tea. Tulsi tea is just really, really delicious. And it's just this awesome everyday multi-purpose herb. It has a lot of more sophisticated qualities as well in terms of it's a plant that brings extra oxygen into your blood, which is helpful in a lot of different situations. It also, there's some kind of there's actually a lot of scientific research on Tulsi in particular from India, since it's such an important plant in traditional healing cultures, but there's also a lot of peer-reviewed, data-driven science that is about Tulsi's medicinal qualities, which is kind of a unique situation for a medicinal herb. But there's a lot of evidence that Tulsi is antioxidant, so helping with certain kinds of cancer and chronic conditions like diabetes, and that it also works in some way with blood pressure, regulating blood pressure and blood sugar levels. So it's really, everyone should be taking Tulsi.
Oh, it sounds so adaptable and that it would really help in many situations. And that's so exciting because it grows like a weed and it's easy to save seed. And it's like this pharmacy in one plant, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good way to put it.
And so you mentioned tea. And what are some of your other favorite ways to use Tulsi?
My other favorite way to use Tulsi is to make a Tulsi honey, which is just delicious. So an herbal infused honey. Tulsi is naturally very sweet, and so paired with honey, it's just a really amazing combination. So to make an herbal honey, it is helpful to warm the honey a little bit. If you're using raw honey, you don't want to warm so much that you're breaking down the qualities of raw honey. But you can use a double boiler or just bring up to a warmer temperature, really low, really slow heat, never to a simmer, but just to a very gentle, steady warm. And you can do that. So if you cover a bunch of Tulsi leaf and flower in honey, either in a double boiler or just in a pot directly on your stove top, You can do that warming process maybe 5 or 6 times over the course of a few days and allow the honey to cool down again after each time, knowing that it will be infusing Tulsi that whole time. And at the end of that process, you'll have this really rich tasting infused herbal honey, and ultimately you'll want to strain the plant material out. We just use cheesecloth and take care to really firmly press the leaves that are left in the cheesecloth, because a lot of honey is infused directly into the leaves, so you really want to press them out in your hands. And then you can bottle and store somewhere cool and dark and dry, and you'll have this really incredible, essentially non-perishable herbal honey.
Oh, that sounds so delicious. And then you said 5 to 6 times during a few days. Is that like a couple times a day you would heat it up?
Yeah, just whenever you walk by your stove and think of it.
And how long do you heat it for?
You just want to get the honey to a slightly warmer than room temperature heat. So it doesn't take very long.
Sounds easy and delicious. I love herbal honeys. I've done rose petal honey before, which was really very subtle, but very nourishing at the same time.
Yeah, herbal honeys are just, you can never go wrong with honey, but when you add plants to it, it's even more amazing.
And, Alena and I did an interview for Sustainable World Radio, my other podcast, which I'm editing now. And I was so inspired by our interview last week, Alena, that I actually made a Tulsi oxymel. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Oxymel.
Oh, yay.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I have it sitting there. And I think that's where you add the whatever herb or plant to apple cider vinegar. So I have it sitting in a little jar, and I'm gently shaking it every day. But I can't wait to try that as well.
Oh, it's going to be so good.
And you add honey to that too.
Yep.
And you also mentioned using Tulsi topically. So would that be, I think you said it would be a great ingredient in a salve or a cream or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you think you could, you know how you can soak calendula flowers in a type olive oil or jojoba? Do you think soaking the flowers in the oil would bring out the medicinal qualities?
Yeah, definitely.
That's so great. And so is there any other use of Tulsi or anything else about this plant that you'd want to share with people today?
I feel like you asked great questions, and we really covered a lot. If I could only just emphasize how simple it is to grow Tulsi, even if you don't have yard or garden space, if you have a big pot in a place that stays consistently sunny, you can grow definitely enough Tulsi to have fresh tea every few days. And the tea is just so delicious and such a nourishing way to take care of your body, especially right now. It's just such a stressful and ever-changing time, and plants like Tulsi can really, really gently help us through moments like this.
And do you believe too, like I know I've talked to a few herbalists about this, where you can make tinctures and kind of concentrated amounts of the plant material, and also just being around the plant and maybe making a tea with it. Do you feel that could be as beneficial as, taking large amounts of the plant?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that is something that anyone, no matter your background experiences and being more closely connected to plants, is just those relationships are so nourishing to us as humans. Our ancestors were alive because our ancestors successfully used plant medicine and learned from plants how to use them. And so I feel like that's in each and every one of our genetic memory, and we can really continue to access that really meaningful relationship through direct participation in gardens and in an individual plant's life. Yeah, I absolutely believe that the relationship itself is so healing.
And it sounds like you have a really good relationship with Tulsi.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I thank you so much. And if listeners are interested in learning more about your herbal CSA, and also your flower CSA, which you just started, they can go to nightheronfarm.org. And thank you so much, Alena. It's been really pleasant and wonderful speaking and learning with you today.
Oh, of course. That's my honor. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to the Plant Report, because every plant has a story.